Please join me, Heather, on stage. Heather Johnson is a multi-purpose good works insurer at Ericsson, where she is Chief Sustainability Officer and also Head of Corporate Responsibility. Wonderful to have you. Heather,
Thanks,
we've worked with Ericsson a lot over the years, so we're very close followers of your company and fans. Why don't you quickly just describe the range of things you do? We're going to talk about the function itself, but also a lot of things that you're doing at Ericsson.
Sure, thanks so much. And I am a bit humble about the topic of the session today, because I think if you asked 100 people what to define a Chief Sustainability Officer, you'd get 100 different answers. I'm happy to share our
Is that a problem, or is
experience.
that just the way it is?
I don't think it's a problem. I think it's actually probably quite healthy for companies to really, design the role for what they need. But let me just share a little bit about what I do.
You do, yes.
So I really start with a foundation of responsible business. So that's the corporate responsibility side. So everything from business and human rights, health and safety, to our ESG reporting. And then we have two pillars of, you could say, positive impact. That is climate action and digital inclusion. So I have a team that's covering that whole range, and it's quite exciting. There's a lot to do.
You know, one thing you should probably do is just quickly describe Ericsson, because some people here may not fully understand what it is. It's based in Stockholm. It's a global company.
Sure.
But tell us about it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll pitch the founder's story, which is that we were founded over 140 years ago by a young Swedish engineer who thought that communication was a basic human need and should be available for all. And I think what's fantastic about this is that we really have remained true to that idea over the course of basically, being on the forefront of communications technology since then. And so we are now a provider of mobile network infrastructure, so our customers are mobile operators such as Verizon here or AT&T. And we're in 180 markets, so we have a very global perspective. And we think that there is a key role for digitalization and connectivity to play, really to underpin sustainable development of society.
Well, I want to get to that in more detail in a minute, but talking specifically about how you work as Chief Sustainability Officer and the goals that Ericsson has and how it's working to achieve them. One of the things that's so impressive is your net zero commitment and the way you're thinking so holistically about your business. So talk about that.
Sure. And I did hear the previous session and some thinking about those net zero commitments. I would say that I think there are companies, Ericsson is one of them, that is making quite substantive net zero commitments. And so ours is that we will be net zero across our value chain by 2040, and we'll start with our own impacts, really our own activities, and be net zero by 2030 there. This is not about sort of kicking the can down the road and 2040. This is underpinned on 5-year measurable targets, looking at our supply chain, looking at how we operate, and looking at our portfolio and use. And we are a research and science-based company, and therefore we are very lucky to have a sustainability research team. They've been doing decades of life cycle assessments, so we really understand our impacts. And I think that is, if there's anything I would recommend to people to take away, it is to really understand your impacts, because it is only there that you can start to make measurable change.
Yeah, and I think when skepticism is expressed, as it was in the previous panel about corporate net zero commitments, it's, I would say, partly because most companies, when they say they're committed to be net zero, they do not include the impact of their products as you do. And especially considering your products are somewhat energy intensive, they're installed all over the world, they're critical infrastructure, that's a challenging goal to have. And I should have also said, you've been with Ericsson for 25 years, you've been in sustainability there for 13 years, and you've been in this role for 3 years. So, but talk a little bit about how you're thinking about reducing the, making net zero the use of your products.
Yeah, well, I should also say that, just thinking about this question about the role of the sustainability officer, one part of the job that I think is really important is to be an advisor, to really help to direct and guide the rest of the company. And I am very fortunate to work across our executive team, with whether it's the CFO, whether it's business lines, to really embed sustainability programs and practices across the company. And so the net zero example is a very good one, because it was both explaining what we mean, whether it's renewable energy for our facilities, our fleet vehicles, our business travel, or how we're working with suppliers. But I mentioned the life cycle assessments. We know that 90% of our impact comes from our products in use. So that means that we are, being able to identify that, talk to our business line owners and explain we need to be looking at the energy efficiency of our networks to be able to really deliver value to our customers. That is not only in terms of, the power of the networks, but also to reduce the energy and emissions, because it is this is one point I'd like to make as well. It is not an either or situation now, and being able to combine the business value with the sustainability value, I think, is really key. So if we reduce the energy use of our products, we're reducing the cost of energy. Before the energy crisis, that was about $25 billion annually for mobile network operators. Wow. And I'm sure it's much higher now.
That was their total aggregate global energy cost, $25 billion.
And that was
just to run cell phone networks.
That was not this year. That was in the past. And so being able to really twin these both sustainability benefits as well as total cost of ownership is key.
Well, of course, you're redesigning your products all the time to be more energy efficient. But how do you deal with products that your products often are used for a long time in the field?
10 years normally.
10 years. Okay, so how do you deal with the installed base?
Well, I think the key is a lot of our technology evolution is software based. So we're able to make very, very quickly be able to switch to more energy efficient. And I should make a plug for 5G, which is certainly getting deployed across the U.S.
Which you guys helped invent. 5G.
We did, but it's the first G, if you will, that had energy sort of energy efficiency in mind. So up to now, historically, you've followed the industry for a long time. The energy use would with every G was increasing. But 5G is the first standard where we're able to decouple. That is, we're able to do more, have more data running on the networks with less energy. And so it is, again, a business value we're able to deliver.
Let's broaden this to, there's so much about your corporate commitments that are admirable. But, you also, as a company, with the sustainability research you do, have thought a lot about the impact of digitalization, which
Absolutely.
Mobile telephony enables and digital connectivity enables, and the role that will play in the globe's overall sustainability journey towards net zero and carbon reduction. So talk about that.
Sure, and I think one of your previous speakers mentioned Johan Rockström. We are collaborating with Professor Johan Rockström in an initiative called the Exponential Climate Action Roadmap, and I really encourage everyone, exponentialroadmap.org. There's a whole host of excellent tools and assets for companies to use that is looking at science-based, assets. But the work that we did, and this was published in 2018, was to really look at and do research on the potential for digitalization across other industries, thinking about the business efficiencies and benefits, how that could also be equivalent to 15% of global carbon emissions by 2030.
Could be reduced by just more use of digitalized economic systems.
Digitalizing transport, digitalizing manufacturing, digitalizing even the energy sector. And, so we are now at the start of that journey, I would say. But with 5G, 2018, that was really before the deployment of 5G. So we anticipate with 5G, we can even reduce more.
And that a lot of it comes from the ability to monitor, measure, and react in real time to the use of systems. I often call it an instrumented society that we really need so that we can measure everything in real time and optimize it for energy efficiency as we're trying to reduce our emissions. So that's great. Now, I know you're also deeply concerned. You and I both have worked closely with the ITU
right.
on extending connectivity globally, which is not unconnected to a sustainability process for the world, because as Sandrine mentioned at the outset, and Sandrine did co-write this Earth for All book with Johan Rockström, who works with Ericsson, this idea of justice as an intrinsic part of a climate transition has got to factor in that there are 2.9 billion people in the world who are not connected to the internet. Think about it. Think about your life and realize there's 2.9 billion people who don't have any internet. Okay, they have to have it. Tell us some of the reasons why.
Well, I think actually, all of us experienced this during the last 2 years of the global pandemic, and we really saw an acceleration of, the need for being connected, being able to work, being able to have remote schooling, being able to see a doctor remotely. I mean, it really, I think, from that perspective, there was really, I think, a boost in awareness of the power of connectivity. But as you and I have known each other a long time, and we have probably been talking about digital inclusion just as long, that is also, it's a quite, huge problem, and it's one that I think, we've really been struggling as an industry to tackle it. And Ericsson has been, even in the infancy of broadband, we were testing and trying how connectivity could be used as an intervention for sustainable development. And one of the areas that we saw that was that had very high impact was around school connectivity. And so that's why we really jumped at the chance to work with the ITU and UNICEF on a global school connectivity problem. This is a global school connectivity.
It's called the GIGA Initiative.
Initiative, GIGA. And the ambitious, audacious goal is to connect every school to the internet by 2030. And this is possible. It is, we're starting already now with helping map school connectivity, because you can't solve a problem until you understand it.
Just figuring out what schools are connected now, what schools are located where.
And when you think about it, schools are a great proxy to at least start to concretize the problem, so that we don't make it just this, massive, problem to solve and challenge without really, starting somewhere. So schools are a great place to start. As you said, and I think even the gender equity speakers said earlier, I think, really understanding that education can underpin so much of sustainable development as well.
But there's also a very concrete connection. I mean, there's multiple concrete connections between helping people participate more in the local economy by becoming connected and the climate crisis. Because for one thing, if they're connected, they can earn more, they can stay put, they can not become climate refugees potentially if they have better economic prospects. And that connection, though, isn't very well understood, it doesn't.
No, and I think too, of course, when we talk about school connectivity, we're also, often thinking about children and school age. But of course, upskilling, digital skills are going to be essential, really, I would say, for lifelong learning and for jobs of the future. And so you're absolutely right that I think, by both from the climate and that sort of inclusion perspective, there are many gains to be realized.
Maybe if we have time, let's take a question or two. Anybody have a question on this? I should have warned you. So, I still think that this issue of committing across your entire supply chain, your suppliers and your customers, is so impressive and so hard. I mean, when you talk to other CSOs, is this something that they're thinking about as a community?
For sure, but I think in one sense, the net zero commitments, if you're working together, it is an ecosystem, it's a virtuous ecosystem, because you cannot succeed if your customers and your suppliers are not on that journey with you. And I think that's also an important, not only being an advisor and guide within the company, but also to be a speaking partner with suppliers, with key customers, to really align efforts. And I mentioned the exponential roadmap there. We did launch a 1.5 degree playbook today. And this is one where really looking at sort of 4 key pillars, reducing your emissions in your own activities, reducing across your value chain, embedding sustainability into your strategy, and then advocating for climate action as one example.
You just launched that today?
We did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. There's so much to discuss. We're out of time, but I guess we have to wrap. But I really think Ericsson is a role model for many companies. And the one thing I also wanted to mention that I think people don't appreciate enough is that when a company like Ericsson is so committed to working across its supply chain, it creates this ecosystem effect where it basically forces everybody else to up their own emissions and climate commitments. Because you're asking them, they have to do it for you, their customer, or you as their supplier are helping them do it at the downstream end. And the more companies do that in every possible direction, the more likely we are to begin to meet some of these goals.
And I mean, just to close on that, I would say whether it's on climate action, whether it's on inclusion, it is really collective action that will help us to succeed. It is no one company, it is no one government, it is no one UN agency or NGO. It's really that collective, commitment, ambition, and then concrete, measurable progress.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank
Great to
you.
have you. Thank you. He's going to take a picture.
Okay.